Let me show these suckers how to ball out here. Oh, man, let's get this together here. Oh, layup. Oh, shot. Oh, three. Oh, it's like Brick City out here. Mid-range. Oh, my goodness. I can't buy a bucket out here. I missed the whole damn basket. Oh, my goodness. What's going on, man? My game is looking trash. Oh, here we go. Black Power Media shirt. Now we cooking. Tree. I'm taking on three of y'all with these right here. Between the legs. Oh, my goodness. Behind the back. Layup. Oh, did he just do a reverse? He is in beast mode out here. I ain't got to look. It's falling. Oh, my goodness. This guy is going 3, 2, 1. Kobe. Nice. Black Power Media, baby. Nice. Empower yourself. Go get you some of that Black Power Media again. Right here, blackpowermedia.org. Yeah.
I mix what I like. All right. What's up, world? Welcome to another edition of I Mix What I Like right here on Black Power Media. Again, I'm Jared Ball, very happy to be your host. Please do jump in, like, share, subscribe, support the platform in any way you like. Immaterially, like, share, subscribe, put this in your socials. And if you're seeing this later, you can always support just by simply
put it in the comments.
If you want to put a couple dollars on the platform, we appreciate that and we'll happily accept it. Black Power Media's Patreon is linked in the show description. Please check that out as well. And get yourself a shirt even, as you saw or some other merch, as you saw there in the promo. All right, so let's get to it. So we can, move on and not belabor the point and not stand on ceremony and all those good things. Among many other things, our next guest, is, of course, host of Breaking Barriers here on Black Power Media. But aside from all of that, Piper Carter lives inside Detroit City. She is an arts and cultural organizer and entertainment justice education, justice maker space, environmental justice, and food justice communities. She is host also of the Piper Carter podcast on Detroit is Different, where she discusses social justice and hip hop to a worldwide audience. She is an image maker, fashion photographer, featured 4 times on Tyra Banks's VH1 TV show, The Shot, the first Black woman to shoot for high-end publications such as French Vogue, British Elle, New York Times, Spin, and Essence magazines, and emerging talent for music companies such as Def Jam, Sony, Warner, Universal, Disturbing the Peace, Elektra, television, cast images for BET, and much more. The link to all of that will be in the show description. But for now, we welcome Piper Carter to the stage. Welcome. Peace. How are you?
Peace, Jared. I'm great. First of all, I just want to say peace to Black Power Media chat. Y'all are amazing. And peace to the whole Black Power Media fam, Ear Doctor, Kalanji, and everyone. Hey, you, Jared, I just want to say thank you. Today is such like a dream come true. I've been a huge fan of yours for a long time. I've seen you speak. I remember you came to Detroit and spoke before. I said hi to you, but you probably don't remember that because everybody was fanning over you after your talk. And and that was a few years ago. You came for at the Commons, at the Cash Corridor Commons. Actually, it's in the basement of the United Universalist. How do you say that? The UU Church that was here. It was a few years ago. It was more than a few years ago. But yeah. I don't know if you remember that.
I don't even remember that.
I do.
To be honest with you. Wow.
You did something with Wayne State University.
Okay, that makes sense because Ali Johnson, shout out to him. He would have been inviting me to Wayne State.
Yep. And so the church is like down the street. It's a social justice church that's like down the street from Wayne State. And you came from there. Y'all have been doing some conference. I don't know what it was, but you came to the community to just like be in community, meet people, and you just kind of kicked it. it was that type of thing. It wasn't too formal, but that's where I
No, yeah.
got to see you because I didn't get to go to the fancy Wayne State event, so I got to
No, but
see
those are always the best parts. I appreciate, in not that it happens that much, but when it does, and I get invited somewhere, and then there are people from the local community that invite me somewhere else like that. That's always the best part. So I'm glad that happened. My memory is just some garbage, so I have to apologize for
No, it
that.
was a
But
while back, and
yeah,
to be honest, you didn't know me, and it was like a sea of people that mobbed you afterwards because we all
oh
whatever the
wow.
Wayne State event was, like we either couldn't get in or it was whatever it was. So it was like they had a secondary event like for us, and then you came, so we
Mm.
actually got to experience you. So that was dope.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah, all right, right on. No, I
yeah,
appreciate that, and that no, I've obviously been aware of your work for a long time. It's an honor to have you join us on BPM as well, and to see your work showing up in the work we're talking about today is dope. So no, this is great. I appreciate it. Uh,
yeah.
I
And
did
just for
want
a
to. Yeah, go ahead.
disclaimer,
Go ahead. Yeah.
yeah,
No,
just
no,
for
go ahead.
disclaimer, I keep my bio because professionally I do a lot of different things. And certain people like to see certain things, but just in the land of like who I am as a person, I identify more as an organizer because I use I feel like what I've done is like what do you call it? Like where you come from the hood, then you kind of like do that George Jefferson thing, and then you realize what it looks like
Move
there,
on
and you're
up.
like, whoa, I gotta get out of here. So I kind of committed class suicide and came on back and just realized like this is where it is. So yeah, just but I do still do like, a lot of I do get hired to do a lot of different things. And so I keep that for people who need to qualify, if that makes sense.
No, but well, no, it does make sense, and I appreciate that. Shout out to Pancho McFarland in the chat too, Leah. Good to see you all. Uh, but I, but even in just reading that there, I mean, it's interesting to me, even as someone who admittedly is a critic of a lot of these institutions, I am fascinated by the experiences of people who are in there, who have worked with them. Uh, so I am curious about your just in general. I know we don't have that much time, but just in general, like what does it so even with what you just said, what is it like to go into that world with the perspective that you have as someone who sees herself as an activist first, someone committed to community and change, et cetera, and so forth. So when you end up engaging VH1 and BET and Sony and UMG and all that, like what? I'm just curious. What is that like? I mean, I do. I mean, I've just yeah. What is that like?
Yeah. So initially, when I say initially, I'm like, so I mean, when I first just got in, if that makes sense, I was very like, oh, I got to get there. I got to work with these people. But upon like say getting there, and then just understanding what that is, I think the more that I had been working on, I'll say like myself, but also just been working in community, there are just certain things that unless you're just willing to act like they don't exist, that you at least for me as a human being, it's like you can't participate. So for instance, um doing things with like BET, like I started to see the demise of BET because I had been doing things with them since like the 90s, right? When they used to actually like serve community. And so like experiencing that demise, I mean, it just I don't know how to explain it, but it just becomes more of where you're just not gonna do it. You're speaking up so much, like you're in the meetings constantly. You always, they used to tease me, and I used to have a nickname. They used to call me Harriet Tubman, which I don't mind. But it's like I'm always gonna speak up. I'm always gonna say something about the images of women. I'm always gonna say something. So after a while, they're not even gonna call you for like certain things, or they're only gonna call you for certain things, which I don't mind, right? Like if you want to, suddenly pay attention to black women and you actually care and you want to call me for that, I don't mind, but there are people, I won't say like myself, but there are people who are in those spaces who consider themselves artists and they only just consider themselves as an artist, and then they compartmentalize self. I'm not one of those persons. I'm a person who is more into integrating myself, and so a lot of that stuff I won't even do anymore. So a lot of unless it's on my terms. And I think what artists need to recognize is you can create your terms. You just have to have terms. And then they do try to make you feel like a lot of FOMO, like if they'll kill your career, but they really can't kill your career. I mean, maybe they won't hire you, or maybe other people adjacent to them won't hire you, but I just believe that the ecosystem is so huge that there's audiences, there's audiences for you. It's a lot more work, but yeah. So I would say my experience is that now that I'm like known as this person, that they only call me for certain things, if that makes sense.
No, it does. I mean, it does.
Mhm.
I'm just curious what again, I'm for instance, just at the conference I went to this past weekend, it's at a level I'm not used to being at. And I'm a little uncomfortable in those spaces. I don't know. I'm always, feeling like I'm not supposed to be here. And it's not the imposter thing, but it's the I really we're not on the same page. And I know it.
It's the
And
values.
yeah.
You have values.
Well, but it's also, I mean, but it's just weird. So I just don't. But and then I also know I don't have to be there. That it's
Mhm.
short lived. I don't. This isn't what I'm building anything off of. So I don't. So I know that it takes the stress off. But if I needed that for income or career goals or I could it just sometimes it would feel stressful. So I'm just curious, but at the same time, I am as much as many, at least not all, curious what it's like on the other side of the celebrity veil, so to speak, or the other lane. Like, what is it? What is it? Uh, Just
It is a
curious. So
lot of
that's yeah,
pressure. Like
yeah,
like what like it is a lot of pressure. I'll say like being in that world, it is a lot of pressure because you're constantly even as a photographer, right? Like you're constantly having to compete. It's capitalism at its worst. You're never as good as even the last thing you did. So it's a constant rat race. You're always on the little wheel, and there's always someone younger, better, more whatever, fill in the blank, and they're the new hot blah blah blah. And it doesn't matter like what you do in that world, you know what I mean? Like there's always the something. And so that's why I think, you know what I mean, it's best to take yourself out of that. And there's a we talk about it a lot on Beyond Breaking Barriers. There's a whole nother ecosystem of people like your Maymuna Yusufs and your Saraks and all this. There's a whole nother world that exists where people are able to put their kids through college and live a life. But I love your book because your book also articulates a lot of what that frustration is. Um yeah, I feel like, the buying power. I do have the old one. I got to get the new one. But I think it articulates a lot of what that frustration is, and it's that it's that there is no there will be no like end. Right? There is no end goal. The end goal is that you're there's a constant carrot that's put in front
yeah,
of you. And that's what it is. It's just a constant carrot. So once you realize that, I mean, no offense to anyone that wants to get plastic surgery, right? But I don't think that people are getting plastic surgery because, they feel good about themselves and this is something they want to do and all this kind of thing, right? I don't care what people say. I don't believe it. And all the other things, right? Like why do people, have this, excessive consumption? And it's just a form of excessive consumption and just a never, like I call it never ending FOMO. I think your book really I like that I like the series you did on your book. I would love to see you do one like a whole I'd love to see you do a conference. I'd love to see a conference, a music conference based on your book, and then bring in different people to have conversations about creating an ecosystem, like a closed loop ecosystem for like arts and culture and music, Like just like the brother that was on there today, on your show today, on the morning show, Kevin, right? Like where that could be a whole ecosystem, and people could, get flued out, if you will, by the, by the BPM types, if you will, so that people who appreciate them, so that people don't have to think about making uh the decisions that they do. But anyway, that's a
No, I
larger.
appreciate that. Once
Yeah.
upon a time, I long time ago flirted with the idea, or tried to begin flirting with the idea of how would we create our own award show. Uh, but just like many great ideas, it just is it's difficult uh, to make happen. So, but so okay. So before we get to the book that we're specifically here to talk about, the other question I did want to ask you, broadly speaking, is I did want to invite your thoughts on this hip hop anniversary, this 50th anniversary, and I admit I've been very frustrated with the way it's been commemorated and celebrated and remembered. But I'm just, if, as you look back on the way it's commemorated and even just experiencing your part of that history, what are your
Yeah,
thoughts?
first of all, I want to shout you out and Kamal and all of y'all. Y'all been baking, y'all been baking those tributes all year. I think it's pure comedy that we need. But I do think that I guess I have like maybe kind of two ways to think about it. So on the one hand, I'm actually really excited to see hip hop, quote unquote, at a level, right? In the sense of, I remember, I'm 51. I'm the same age as hip hop. So I remember growing up and them saying, "Oh, it's just a fad. This is gonna pass," type of thing. And then to see Missy Elliott be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Okay, on that level, like in that Matrix world, all that stuff's deserved. All that stuff's great. I do think though, in the land of, if we're, I mean, and I'm kind of going off the buying power book, if we're looking at it in the land of like, where, like, has hip hop actually, like, there's lots of attribution that like hip hop has, like, caused us to be elevated, right? Like, look at, like, Obama became president because of hip hop. Like there's all these type of things, right? And so in the reality, like in the material world, no, hip hop has not saved us. I would say that I appreciate hip hop, as a hardcore hip hop head. I would say hip hop has not saved us. And so I will never like conflate um all the ways in which we need to have access to all the things we need to have access to. I don't think that hip hop has, quote unquote, done that for us. And I do agree when you're talking about this aspirational part of where we're supposed to look at, well, look at, Jay and Bay, and they represent us. And so look what hip hop did and look at where we are. I agree with you. Like I reject that. Like I wholeheartedly reject that to the fullest. I will say though, what I do like in this moment of hip hop, like all the tributes and everything, I do like where the spaces that I've been in, where as I get hired a lot to DJ a lot of these like nonprofit spaces, right? And when I'm there, I do see them using it to do a lot of I'll say acknowledgement around the work that needs to be done. And so by that, like I was at a racial justice conference DJing. They had, 3-4 days of all this racial justice stuff, and I did a presentation on the history of women in hip hop. And I do like that they were looking at the 50th anniversary as to see how can we do better? Like what are the ways in which we can do better? I like that. Like I like that aspect of the 50th. Like looking back, I like the whole D Barnes part in the what is it? The documentary that you
Well, that
Dreams
was the thing.
documentary.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but that was the thing. They didn't talk about. There was more discussion of what happened with her and what happened with the other sister. Now I'm forgetting her name. That Kalanji also
Oh
interviewed.
yeah.
with like they
What's
didn't
her
talk
name?
about that with Russell at all.
No,
Like
they skated. They skated around that. But I guess what I'm saying, I like that. So that I mean, they didn't do it specifically, but what I've seen, because I went to U of M to do a talk, because I teach inside of, I'm not a professor, but I'm teaching artists inside of University of Michigan. They have a hip hop history class inside of there. I think it's called Africana Studies or something like that. But inside there, I was talking to some students and asking them, and ladies first, that's what it was. And interestingly enough, a lot of those young people, and obviously because of the way hip hop is presented, they had no idea about much of the history, right, of hip hop, like at all. So for them, I almost had to do a disclaimer alert, because I watched at least 200-300 people in this lecture hall go, when because I kind of casually mentioned it, right? Because I'm kind of thinking, oh, everybody saw this lady's first documentary. And when I casually mentioned that, Dr. Dre beat the brakes off of this woman, like the whole class was like, what? And we had to stop there because they were like, oh my God. Like they had never heard of this, right? They didn't know anything about this. So what I do think, and not to like demonize an individual, but like I guess what I'm saying is, like, within the context historically, in my experience, I don't think that we've ever really talked about a lot of the challenges in hip hop until this 50th. Now there have been scholars, and there have been Artricia Rose has been out there for us. You know what I'm saying? Thank you. You know what I'm saying? I know, but I'm putting things in context. I'm putting things in context.
That early work, let me just be clear, because I know I made a face.
Yeah.
Let me just be clear. That early work from Trisha Rose is essential. I'm not going to front.
I'm talking about the early work. I'm talking about the early
Hip Hop
work.
Wars book. I have
exactly
endless problems with, but I don't agree with what, and we can talk about it if you want, but I don't agree with that at all. Her approach that I thought had a lot of problems, but a lot of her early work, I definitely. I mean, you're right. She's Black Noise.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
and the
there's a
early
lot of
articles about the abuse, the media representation of violence to get rid of hip hop from venues and all. Like, she did a lot of important work. So, it's that I just anyway. Okay.
I mean, all our icons are problematic. I don't know what to tell you.
like my man, like Rashad Dobbins from Cordell West Theory said in that track that ear doctors that and some of you in the audience rejected as what should be our anthem. He said some of our icons shouldn't have their mics on.
That's true. That's true. I mean, I'm putting things in context though, right? So I do think that there have.
And I'm sorry, did you see this? I just wanted to clarify. It wasn't Russell Simmons wasn't accused of assaulting Drew Dixon. It's the other sister whose name I'm
No,
or is that Drew Dixon? No, that was Drew Dixon. I'm sorry. My bad, Leah and everybody.
Leah,
no,
it was Drew Dixon.
It was Drew Dixon. And then you were right. And Dre assaulted D Barnes. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. There's just
no, it's all good. It's so many.
Sorry, Leah. I apologize to Leah too. Right, it's so much. It's hard to keep track of who assaulted who. It's ridiculous. And then a student of mine just yesterday asked me, had I seen the Hulu documentary about the dude I keep wanting to say is Jeff Bezos, as though I know, the head of Interscope and Dre, that came out a couple of years ago called The Defiant Ones.
Oh, I didn't see that. Okay, I gotta go look.
But peep how they made it. It's a play that, the title, some of us will remember, is a play on that initial that classic movie with Sidney Poitier and the white boy escaping, like in that, the black and white, it was like the black man, the white man, and then here they come with what's my man at Interscope? I keep wanting to call him Jeff Bezos, but that's not his name.
Jimmy Iovine?
Iovine.
Yeah.
So then this is the documentary. So I have not seen this. How much you want to bet D Barnes isn't mentioned? Yeah, right. Look at that.
Like a horror flick.
Right. It is. I think it is, Piper. I think it is a horror flick.
Oh my God.
To me, those are the horror movies. Like that,
Yeah.
that's I don't care about the screams and the whatever else is. Like, that's not scary. That's scary.
Yeah, that's scary. But also too, I mean, I don't want to let me just say this about that. There are stories out there that are true, and only because we're on YouTube and I want to protect Black Power Media. Let's just say there's a story out there I need y'all to look up
Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
about someone that was an executive that went into a certain popular magazine's office and started beating people up. I won't name names because I don't want to
Can you at least put it in the
cause
private
problems
chat? I don't
here. Yeah, but
can you put it in
I'll
the
say, look,
I don't
you guys
remember.
look it up. I'll send it to you, Dr. Ball. I'm not even sure it was actually even written about, but I'll just say it was commonplace. It was very commonplace in the 90s, and to be honest, that's how a
I
lot of
think I
things
know
got
of one story. Yeah, I'm sorry. To be
yeah,
honest.
yeah. No, I'm saying that's how a lot of things got done, right? I
Mm,
mean, to be honest, I'm being honest with you. A lot of these people would not be where they are had they not strong arm and had all this violence.
mm,
So a lot of I love your take in your book when you talk about the concept around do like are the things that we say we like because we actually like them, or have we been
mm,
programmed, right? That's very true because I was there watching people be programmed. I watched a lot of people lose their job because they got beaten up because this person over here at this label, wanted their artists to be elevated, and these writers over here at a magazine were like, they're trash. And it was like, really? And they come over to the
mm.
magazine mobbed up, and then next thing you know, this person's on the cover and they don't like the article that's written. They go down there and beat the brakes off of them. Next thing you know, oh, he's in the top 5. Okay, that was normal for at least a decade. I want to say like mid like late 90s. It's probably normal now, but I say at least late 90s to like early 2000s. This was like par for the course, and that's why a lot of writers and things now also too culturally, many of the writers, they would say, many of the people at the publications, they would say, oh, they're like of the culture, but these were young Caucasian kids claiming that they like know the culture better than you. And honestly, a lot of these publications were not hiring people from the culture. They were hiring these little white boys that said they knew better. And this is who was elevating, and this is who was writing about our culture. And
I
no
mean, the
offense,
source is white boys at Harvard, right?
it
That's
was all white boys that get to say the top 5, that get to say, that get to actually identify who I want to say our leaders are, but but yeah. And so because but this is the way that the business was done. Because truth be told,
mm.
there never was a time in the music industry where thuggery wasn't a part of the music industry. That's always been the way you get business done, to be honest.
The
Yeah.
classic book I was told to read, the first book I was told to read when I wanted to do my dissertation was Hitmen.
Mm,
And it was meant to be a play on the word. These were
mm,
hitmen who created hit records, but they were literally hitmen who shot you in the head if you didn't play the record they wanted to be a hit. And it was all mafia, Italian Jews, etc., so forth. Mafia, not like Jews. We not the Jews Kanye's trying to talk about. These are the Jews you don't want to ever see in no boardroom and all that
from
other
the
stuff. You
Bronx.
read that article? These are not the Jews you're gonna have kissing pictures of Nazis and all that stuff that he was talking about in that New Yorker article that came out recently. No,
It's like
these are the
the Once
ones.
Upon a Time in America.
That's the Jews. That's the Jews. Exactly. It was like them and the Italian. It was like a whole
Mhm.
bunch of that. And then and on
I
a
never
much lower
left.
level, some of them were black too. A couple of
Oh
like some
yeah,
thugs down there too. It was like,
that whole element never left, and that is the
mm,
element that actually. has always run the music industry. Let's be honest about that. Whether we people say, "Oh, you have payola." That's how business was
Please.
done, was
That's it.
payola, you know? And so I that's why I say I love the other ecosystem, because there's a whole nother world that has nothing to do with that stuff, you know. Like I said, there's a, I mean, we had, oh, I gotta deviate for 1/2 second. We were talking about that, and in your interview with Tony Blackman about the State Department, I also talked to Mahogany Jones about the State Department. Mahogany Jones, well, Tony Blackman, um, now, world renowned MC, freestyle artist, and all of that, has a deep relationship with the State Department. And initially, I think that's the way that they were able to travel a lot, right? And Mahogany Jones also a part of Rhymes Like a Girl, which is Tony Blackman's organization. And so they're always doing like these State Department trips. But I had a conversation on Beyond Breaking Barriers with Mahogany Jones about that. And it was so controversial because I asked her, because she's been to like Kyrgyzstan. I mean, she's been to so many countries. And I asked her, like, well, I saw this interview with Jared and Tony Blackman about the State Department. What are your thoughts about being an artist that works with the State Department? And the first thing I said, name some of the places you like to go. And she said, Israel. I said, oh my God. I like almost froze in my tracks. I wish I had that buckwheat thing you put up. I was like, I didn't know what to say. I thought to myself, oh Lord, should have said this on BPM. But I thought about it. I said, well, you know what? We're having a conversation, so let's have it. But I didn't, I'll be honest with you. I did not attack her. I didn't go all the 10 toes down, because in that moment, I think I actually realized like she didn't really know like what was wrong with going to Israel. And I was like, yeah, I'm not about to blast her on Black Power Media because she don't know. There's a private conversation we're gonna have to have. And so I did do another apology on my next show to the audience.
Well, I mean, listen, I think that's a difficult situation to be in. I mean, and the reality is that it's, now this is messed up because all I hear is what Diallo is going to be saying tomorrow. That's all and on some level he's right, but on the other hand, I am aware of all that goes into that pressures artists and where artists are coming from. And they're not coming out of politically educated spaces. They're not coming out of radical spaces. They're focused on their craft as much as some of us might be focused on studying and preparing for these sort of conflicts and histories or whatever. But so to be fair, it's not but I get it. I mean, look, I've had a number of uncomfortable conversations with artists around that issue. And I don't know if you saw it, but I thought that I hate to admit it, but I thought that the NPR program Code Switch did a really good job of addressing that. And they interviewed her this a couple months ago or a month ago, Tony Blackman, and talked about, and I thought their approach was as good as you could get in drawing out those contradictions without blasting someone. Because at the end of the day, it's not Mahogany Jones's fault. And at the end of the day, it is, I think, more incumbent upon us who think we know better to create the situation where that's untenable, because otherwise they're always going to be able to find somebody.
Yeah. And that, I guess, kind of leads me into the book. I mean, I love, just let me say this about the book. I got the book here, Women Rapping Revolution. This book basically, I'll tell you real brief. I say it a few times on the show, but it basically came about not as a book. Like, that wasn't the intention. Basically what happened is we meaning like myself and some of the women, were responding to a need. and the need was we just needed a space, um, or at least I saw a need, right? So I had a space at the time, and I reached out to different women and was like, hey, you don't have to, worry about like not having a space. You got a space here, we'll create our own space. And that's basically how that started. And then um as I started learning, then started implementing stuff that I was learning. So it was so organic, and it was just it just turned into a no misogyny open mic that was every week. It ended up lasting 5 years. We learned a lot. We were just experimenting. We would have women DJs and women B girls and women graffiti artists. Everyone was welcome to experience it. It's just you couldn't do misogyny, right? And so it grew, and it got a lot of attention. But in the middle of doing this work, I want to say we had been doing it maybe a couple of years, got approached by Dr. Kelly Hay and Dr. Rebecca Ferrugia, who were at Oakland University here in Michigan. And they were like, we're really interested in what y'all are doing. Do you mind if we study you? And I was like, hell no. And so, so for a whole year, they just kept showing up. And then they came back like a year later, like, look, we're not trying to like, exploit you. It's just that we're fascinated by what you're doing. We'd like to document it and do some interviews and, help understand. And so we created terms, like we need y'all to use your whiteness to support what we're doing. We need you to kick in. We kind of like set the terms of things, we need to be in charge of the narrative, all of that. So initially it was more just like a study, and we worked together, and they eventually became a part of our community in that way. um, and then they turned it in as journals, as academic journals that would literally probably live somewhere on a shelf that only academics would read or care about. And so if they had some meetings and things, and they talked to Jeff Chang. I don't know if folks know who Jeff Chang is. He's a hip hop scholar and I want to say activist, organizer, writer. And he was one of the people who read, was one of the readers of this project. And so it eventually became a book. And then the book was actually launched, I want to say, in June 2020, but we know what happened June 2020. So all the like what we thought we were going to do, because we thought we were going to do all these book tours and we were going to be able to use that to like get the women to like perform. None of that happened. Like everybody had to sit their ass down. And so here we are. And so what I've been doing is working to get the book to different people so that we could have conversations like this, or so we could get invited to come to universities and things and have conversations about maybe the way we did things, or just because I would say because we did a lot of experimenting, but we also did a lot of study. And anyway, I'll put a period there, but that is kind of like the long and short of how this book came to be.
No, I appreciate it. And the subtitle and the subtext of the book is Detroit. So I wanted you, if you would, to sort of help us with some of that context, beyond 8 Mile and Eminem and
okay, well, let me tell y'all about Detroit. So Detroit, its original name is Wawiatanang, and that's the Anishinaabe people that were originally here. We call it in our community Wawiatanang, or we call it Motown, or we call it the D. Obviously, we have an amazing musical lineage of jazz and blues, but also R&B, right? We have a little place called Motown, which I grew up right across the street from Hitsville, USA. So I had to pass it every day going to school. My mom, rest in power, Maggie Jean Research, she was the first accounts payable at Motown. So if you go to the Motown Museum, there's a time card thing, and one time card is my mom's. And she did all the books and things like that. Before my mom passed away, I did the best I could to try to interview her, but she refused. She was like, I'm not snitching. like, oh my God. So I do have a lot of stories secondhand, but I'll probably have to tell you offline. Just
Now I feel like those should be Patreon specials.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But
Piper's stories,
yeah, no, I do
Motown
have a lot of
stories.
stories that she would tell me, and I did the best I could to try to get her on video. She was like, hell no, I'm not snitching. I'm like, wow. But yeah, and so Detroit, I mean, Berry Gordy, although I do have my challenges with Berry Gordy, Puffy took his book of how to shit on artists from Berry Gordy, unfortunately, but he took it directly from Berry Gordy. But at the same time, Berry Gordy did, as my uncle would say, give them crackers a run for their money. And so, he did create a system for people outside of that system, you know, for whatever it's worth. He did do that. And then I'm gonna say we, you and Diallo always talking about something. We ain't do shit. But I would say, but in Detroiters actually created techno as well. Techno is a black art form that was created by Detroit guys inside of Detroit. And then we have Jay Dilla, one of the most prolific music producers of our time, arguably that created the genre called neo soul. But
That's interesting. Yeah.
yeah. And so I'd say arguably because some people credit Kadar. So anyway, I'm Team Detroit, so I'm gonna say Dilla. But that's a lot of our musical legacy. And so as you can see, Detroit also has a legacy of creating ecosystems outside of the ecosystem, if that makes sense. What else? Also, too, y'all know the history about the so-called white flight and the urban, industrialization and all the things, right? Redlining, and the markation of the 67 rebellion. I would say after that, like after Motown went to LA, early 70s, and not just the Motown, but I'll say it's like a mark that we look to if we're staying within the context of music as to when, we got the black mayor, right? We got Coleman Young, first black mayor. So on the one hand, Detroit is a place where we had a lot of destruction of intentional destruction of black communities. It is also a place where a lot of the black power uh, uh, formations were seated. So like Legal Revolutionary Black Workers, my uncle, shouts out to my Baba Ibn. Well, he just passed away last year, so rise in power. But Aaron Ibn Pori Pitts was one of the creators of Drum, which was a part of Legal Revolutionary Black Workers, which is a part of General Baker, rest in peace. Also, my uncle helped create like a Republic of New Africa. He was a part of that formation, right? So there's a lot of strong black liberatory resistance that is also a legacy of Detroit. I won't say exclusive, like a lot of the black folks around here would say we created, because it was, I'm not gonna go that far, but I will say a lot of it was seeded here, right? A lot of it was seeded here. And I honor that. And so myself, I grew up like in all of that.
By the way, forgive the interruption, but I think
Yeah.
it's great if we have a nationwide competition for the most black radical city. Like I don't have a problem with that. Like if we're gonna compete, let it be on that basis instead of some football or basketball or whatever.
Yeah, we're the ones
we got
where
the
black
best.
power was born. So
right, we the nicest on the grill. I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't
But
care who had the most black power.
We battling Chicago. We battling LA. Like we battling. We out here, but we out here too. We outside. As our ear doctor would say. So yeah, so I grew up in all of that. And in addition to that, I grew up in like the African centered community, which is a whole nother. It used to be different than it was, at least in Detroit. So I grew up in like African centered school, and just totally outside the matrix. And I grew up with all black, like all black around me, all black teachers, all black leadership, all the black people, our political leaders, like the whole city, everything around me was black. I'll be honest with you. Um, I think that the Detroit that I had moved back to in 2008, when I I left New York in 2008, came to take care of my mom and become her caregiver. And when I came back here, obviously it was at, the net the the financial what do they want to call it? The height of the bankruptcy.
Oh,
Um so
the
they
collapse.
got the bailouts to the auto industries, and Detroit is an auto town. So they destroyed the unions. So it was just like a really, devastating moment. And within all of that, you have the height of the gentrification. I mean, but gentrification's always been going on. It's just that Detroit hadn't seen it at such levels until then. And that was like what I came back to. And there was aggressive a second wave, or maybe a third wave of an aggressive destruction against the people, where because of the bankruptcy they created something that was called the emergency manager. And they did it on a federal level. I think they're rolling it out across the country now, but what they did was they placed people to bottom line all decisions, which is how the Flint water crisis was created, because they decided all the decisions were just like, what's the cheapest way to do it, despite, whatever. So we were seeing that in housing. We saw there's a land czar here named Dan Gilbert with the Rocket Financial and Quicken Loans, who did all these like double mortgage scams. And so people at the same time, right, that they're declaring bankruptcy and they're bailing out these banks, and that the gentrification's happening, they have decided to cut off people's water. They have decided to cut off their electricity, to put them out their house, close down like 250 schools, and turn off their street lights, cut off access to emergency services. All this stuff's being done like just at the same exact time. And even the schools that are open, they're defunding the schools, right? At the same exact time, they're creating these programs like the Green Light surveillance project, where they tell the supermarket person, if you put this green light, we'll put a camera, we can see everything. And I guess that's supposed to keep you safe. Go straight to the police department, and all these things. So just like y'all were talking about on the show
Man,
earlier.
I'd have been thinking you can't do that because you're going to catch me ripping off the register.
I mean, not only that, people don't recognize that the camera is like,
you're going to catch me slipping groceries to my buddy.
they're gonna see you just walk in and out of your house. How about that? If you
I know,
live
I'm just playing
around the
again.
grocery store, and the same people that saying we didn't catch these people, there's a camera going in and out your house all day, at least as far as the eye can see down the
That's
block.
crazy.
That's crazy. But eventually, after people learned that the hard way, they started pushing back a little bit. But it's the police so gangster, they told the shopkeepers, if you don't have the green light, it's no guarantee we could protect you. Whoa, because they got a whole outside contract with some contractor. But anyway, all that stuff's going on, which I heard about this morning on your show, that's going on in Baltimore and everywhere else. And
Yeah.
so they literally destroyed, people's neighborhoods. Now, mind you, this means that people are going to leave. And so while, yes, people were leaving because they blame it on because of the auto industry and having to, exit workers, but really they made it impossible to live here. So majority of the people who did stay, they didn't have nowhere to go. Nobody's going to buy their house. They didn't have no money to go nowhere. So um and then the ways in which they demonize the people, because Dan Gilbert put out ads in the New York Times and all these other publications nationally, saying that the reason that Detroit was destroyed is because of the leadership, because they try to blame Kwame Kilpatrick. Now, Kwame did fuck up. Kwame messed up. Okay. And at the same exact time, he was used and set up. He fell for it. You know what I mean? It doesn't mean that he didn't go for the cheese, but all of
He
it.
didn't look too good, but the idea that he is the reason that Detroit is a mess is also misleading. Like that's
It's
the whole
misleading.
point. So
Yeah. And so that's
it's
where
yeah.
so that's the narratives though, right? So that's the narratives that get put. So with that, then they create a situation where they're able to insert this white leader. And so anyway, they basically did the best they could to destroy Detroit. So while all of that's going on, I move here to help to be with my mother and be her caregiver. And as she got better, I had co-owned this space, so just started utilizing that space to do something in the community that I felt passionate about, that I felt that I could do, like you said, without having too much pressure, which ended up being a lots of extreme pressure. If you read the book, we went through a lot of crap. We The space that I owned, I actually ended up being violently removed from, by the we it was in an area called Corktown, and very racist area here in Detroit. And the business association put their money together and created a private police task force to raid us 6 times at gunpoint, and did everything they could. I had invested my life savings, which is about 500K, into taking the space from being condemned to up to code to providing different things we needed, like a space for us to have, like, memorials, a space for us to have weddings and parties, and all the ways in which we needed a space and community, so that people who need to gather can have a space. And also, yeah, we did art gallery, we did incubating of vegan food businesses. We did performances, classes. We even had programs to where parents could be there, and because people didn't have jobs, we were like, well, but you still have value. You know what I'm saying? So people had a lot of skills that we would bring in, and we were just utilizing it as a place where people could share skills, and just teach each other, teach youth, and help build ourselves up and build businesses. But I guess that was too much black joy for these people. And so it's a longer story that is like, wow, all we went through. But what ended up happening is my business partner and several of his comrades decided that they were too fearful of these folks. And so they helped to implode the whole thing. And so once that ended, then I ended up uh, it ended up getting super ugly. I got death threats and had to leave the country for about a month. And I went to rural Costa Rica to just like woosah, and came back and was kind of low key on another side of town until I could, like, get myself together. And then started to develop, like, what I have now, which is like an organization to support the efforts that we were doing in that space. And so I no longer own that space, but I do have access to several community spaces, who some of them have based it off the space that we created, to be able to do some of the things. And then now, interestingly enough, I'm often asked to consult and be a part of different organizations on their consultation about, how do we use arts and culture, uh, to do whatever. I know that was a lot, but that's like,
No, it is a lot. I mean, but but the you've obviously been through a lot, and then the book covers at least some of that a lot, and so it's important. It's understandable. Uh, what when so when the title is Women Rapping Revolution, what talk a little bit about what that is meant to mean. Uh,
yeah, it's the
yeah.
resistance of all of that stuff that so I guess basically, like I said, we hadn't intended on, like, doing a social justice project. Let me say that. It wasn't that thoughtful, to be honest. It was literally like, I'm tired of every time I go somewhere, it's mad dudes and they're beating on their chest. It's no women here. And I don't want somebody grabbing my butt because I want to hear some dope beats. You know what I'm saying? And that's where it came from. However, at the same time, because that is what we were creating, and because it was an open container, and because I, like I said, started getting more involved in a lot of movement, it organically turned into utilizing that space to do a lot of movement work. And so I would, people would, we were kind of centrally located, like right next to downtown. So people would be like, some of the more revolutionary side of hip hop would be like, yo, it's gonna be a protest, we need somewhere to go to make some signs because we're gonna march. It'd be like, oh, come on through, right? So those types of things sort of organically started happening, because we were doing a night for women in hip hop. We didn't want people, we wanted women to feel safe. So no, you can't, say certain things, or you can't act in certain ways, because that creates a certain atmosphere. And so we started to do that, and then the atmosphere was changing, because either you were going to be with it or you were going to be like, nah, right? Fortunately, a lot of people ended up wanting to stay and becoming transformed in that moment. So things like, from small things, which I'm just going to say small things, like some of the dudes who I would identify as like, interesting characters. They would come, very respected hip hop dudes. And after a while, they kind of became our organic security. So when other dudes would come, like, yo, 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 they'd be like, yo, bro, we don't do that shit here. Here, we respect women. You not calling nobody no bitch, about. So it kind of just morphed into like this organic thing. And then it just became sort of cultural. And as they were watching it, they were like, wow, y'all are utilizing, they were the ones who actually helped me see, like, oh, that's what we're doing. Because in my mind, I was like, no, we're just doing something that needs to be done. I wasn't really looking at it like I'm a revolutionary. But I think probably that revolutionary stuff, because that's what I grew up in, was probably so much in me that it just kind of was like, yeah, we're not doing that. Like, so I think it was a little bit of organicness as I started to learn more, though. And I do appreciate them, because although I was reading, because they were studying a lot of like hip hop scholarly things, they would actually bring stuff, and I'd be like, oh, they'd be like, do you know this? Do you know that? I'd be like, oh, really? Oh, cool. They actually put me on to a lot of people to read. And as I started learning more, then I would reach out to the people, that we were reading, and then just started to develop a better analysis. That's what I'll say. My analysis started to sharpen, and then that was stuff that I was sharing. And then we were all sharing it, right, as like a group. And so it did become this sort of organic way. And then we started to be able to articulate, like, oh, I understand that we are actively resisting against this thing. So whether it was people's water getting shut off, or whether it was, closing of a school, we were actively resisting against that, but it became much more of us organizing and us understanding the necessity of organizing and understanding how to organize and then becoming organized. And I think that is where the women, rapping revolution, then we started doing more projects that intentionally addressed all of the issues that we were currently struggling against. So I think that's more where the title comes from.
Right on. So listen, just only because of the interest of time,
Oh yeah, yeah.
and I'm unfortunately I'm a little bit limited here. A couple
Let's
things
get
have
to your
just
beef.
it's not beef.
No, it's all
It's
good. I'm just
not beef.
that's
I
hip
I
hop terms.
I was I just want to be clear. I just want to be
Yeah,
clear.
yeah.
But I was drawn to the chapter on hip hop activism because I've long had a problem with how this is approached and defined. And so when I read that chapter, there were a number of things in the chapter that I thought spoke to my longstanding issues with all of that. So I'll just quickly lay out a few of them, and then you can, for instance, and this was something that I really, really wish that Bakari Kitwana's book on this had come out, because I don't know if our email exchange would have made it, but I would have wanted to see what more people have had to say about this idea of the hip hop activist. By the way, to your point, when students come to my classes, as is the case this semester, not only do they not know the history, they don't know the elements, they don't know any of what we're talking about in terms of this hip hop activist label or all. And that was one of my biggest of the many problems with all of this anniversary stuff, that none of this history is brought up. Yeah, I just thought that was like the whole, none of it's brought up. So okay, so when I'm reading this chapter, for instance, there's a part where it says, in the context of teaching youth about careers and entrepreneurialism, which I obviously have issues with, it says that Dilla Youth Day embodies quote, the principles of hip hop based education. But per my ongoing issue with this, that's never explained. What are those principles? What does it mean to be principally educating on the basis of hip hop? And I say that to say that when it's not properly defined, it leaves it to mean that anything we do using turntables or a mic or graffiti, and we can, anything can be attached to that. So whether we're teaching people Black capitalism and or banking and financial literacy, but if we use turntables, that's hip hop education. But if we're teaching Black nationalist politics with a microphone, that's also hip hop education. So but it's never made clear. So so that was sort of, and I will say that I'll just skip to one of the other sort of pet peeves, because I appreciate you making reference to the buying power work, but the other thing I've written is about mixtapes and about the ability for the history of the rap music mixtape to expose the colonial reality that Black people suffer. So when I read in this chapter, and I don't want to what I've heard called Gish Gallop, so I'm just going to leave it with these two issues. I don't want to just there's a couple of issues here. One is political, and the other, I would have to say, is academic or scholarly, in the sense that, so for instance, and I'll even show the page here just so you and everybody can see what I'm talking about. There's a part where there's a discussion of Denim Day and some of the work you all were doing around raising some very important issues around the R word. I know we're on YouTube, you're not supposed to say the R word, that women suffer all the time and rhymes with grape. And the amounts of reporting, and so on the one hand, the chapter talks positively about Denim Day, which I believe you were running, I think, or
Mahogany, but I was
Mahogany.
but I was supporting. Oh, but I was helping power it. So yeah.
So on the one hand, there was the part where there's this, let's work with the police on kits and stuff like that I was a little uncomfortable. I admit I'm uncomfortable with, although I understand the greater good or the attempt at reaching a greater good. But specific to that work around mixtapes, this part here says, it is well documented that listening to and producing rap can function as a site of emotional release, counter-nihilism, and counter-destructiveness. And it was in the context of talking about the production of mixtapes as a response to trauma and healing and whatnot. And there was reference made, and I looked up the citation, there was reference made to an article co-authored by Levy and others. And when I looked up the article, I'll just read what my note is here, because I actually read the article. It's not that long, kind of short. I said, the Levy article shows no real evidence of the claim and suggests the parallel to drum circles and the ability to make mixtapes are signs of resistance and therapy. My own mixtape argument challenges this. In other words, my argument is that no, mixtapes are not healing. They're exposing the colonialism. And if we saw it properly, we would rebel, organize ourselves into rebellion. Long story short. So I say all that to say that what I'm really getting at here is that I think there's a flaw in the in a lot of the approach to what is hip hop activism and what can be said to be a positive with this hip hop pedagogy. And it's just something I've always struggled with. And I know it's good for it's appropriate, I'm sure, in funding literature. But if we're talking about, certainly an academic or scholar, and with all due respect, the article that they were referencing it's really empty. I mean, basically, they're like, I had some students who suffered trauma create mixtapes, and they said that made them feel better. I don't know to what extent. I feel like that's not evidence. That's not study. That's not. But then that gets referenced in this chapter as they said, well documented that listening to and producing can. So I mean, all I'm saying is that I just think that that's indicative of this flaw that I have with this, and wrap it up here with where I started with Bakari Kitwana, that was the back and forth that we had in this email exchange that I didn't know would end up in the book or not, but which was, and the crux of my argument was everything is called hip hop activism, but it's not defined. So like when the chapter mentions Grace and Lee Boggs, there's literally not one mention of the word communism or socialism or radical Black liberation movement. So it's like, well, what does it mean to be building in the legacy of Grace Lee Boggs or the Boggs tradition? What is the and what I was saying to Kitwana is if you can have a hip hop Republicans group using hip hop to organize people to vote Republican, as was the case. And then you can have those of us looking to use hip hop for anti-colonial, Pan-African, blah, 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 blah. Then what does it mean to be a hip hop activist? So that was really that. So that's it. That's
okay.
It.
So the first one, I'll just say for the Dilla Youth Day, I'll be so brief. I created that day because part of the work that we were doing in our center is working with youth. And so the name of my center was 5E Gallery, after the 5 elements of hip hop. And so everything that we did was based on 5 elements of hip hop. What I mean by that is we not only had all the classes in each element, and we did have lots of discussion groups and learning circles around a lot of Grace Lee Boggs' work, but a lot of different people's work, and like what that means to us currently, whether it's things that were going on in our community or things that were going on in the space. And what we realized is that a lot of young people did not have any access to understand any of the histories that we were talking about. And so they did give us a lot of resistance because just approaching it with books, when we realized that a lot of our young people do have reading challenges, that was not working as well as we would have liked, and we wanted them to read. And so to encourage them to read, we what we did was develop other ways for them to be interested. And some of those other ways to be interested was to break down in conversation, but just like break down a lot of the ways that they had resisted even what we were talking about, right? They would say things, and please forgive me, but they would say things like Martin Luther King is a bitch, right? And we'd be like, so we're trying to understand, like, what does that mean? Obviously it means
we've all had those moments, to be fair.
Right. And that's fine. But I do think that instead of just like trying to be like, no, he's not, and try to be like the adults about it, try to understand more, right? And then find ways in which we could reach them to where then it would be like, okay, well, what about this or what about that? Even showing them some of the that CIA footage where his guards pulled out guns. We were like, okay, see, like the nonviolence was a tactic, but it wasn't necessarily a lifestyle, right? And
you
so
gotta send me a link to that. I don't think I've ever seen that. I don't know what that is.
Okay, yeah, I'm gonna send. Yeah, there's
Anyway,
yeah. It was like it was right before. it was the anyway, I'll look for it. It was like some stuff with Deacons for Defense and anyway. But any
Right
hootie
on,
Rudy
yeah.
tootie, we were, we would have conversations with them because they say, oh, because this, with, even when we talked about Deacons for Defense, they say, oh, no, they real niggas, or even things like that, right? So, but even just trying to like just like break down like some of the understanding of like why, right? And just trying to understand more. And as we humbled ourselves to try to understand more, then we could get at the crux of like what they were actually naming, right? And so then we would try to find like hip hop references that were relevant to them to try to bring that in to like break things down. I think that because we were constantly in spaces where we were talking about b-boying or graffiti or MCing or music production or DJing, whatever, we were constantly teaching about the elements of hip hop and that, like KRS-One has the 9 elements, right? And Keith Tucker inducted health and wellness as the 10th element of hip hop, right? In 2016. And we were just constantly utilizing what was happening to have larger conversations about like what you're talking about or even break down capitalism. um, and I think for us, when I say hip hop as a tool, we actually did have discussions about, we combined learning the histories of hip hop, right? Because we have to honor that while New York has its foundation, California has its foundation, and there's a little tension there as to like, in the hip hop sphere as to like which came first, chicken or egg, right? Especially in the dance community. And so we would utilize the space to have those particular conversations as well as conversations around all the things, right? Like Pan-Africanism or internationalism or anti-blackness, anti-capitalism, misogyny, but we would utilize hip hop. So for me, I will say that's what we particularly meant about utilize hip hop. I can't speak for others who when they say that, right? Now in terms of the activism, for us, I'll name that we never necessarily labeled ourselves as activists per se. We were labeled as activists. And so I would say that that's more of a label. Um, but we were activated, right? Like we were at protests against the Koch brothers. We were down there protesting against the stadium. I mean, we did, organize and do door knocking. Like we did do a lot of work um to teach people. Now that's that. Now for the other point around like the denim day thing, I do agree. I know that when like for me, a lot of times in doing a lot of work, I have to collaborate. And I would say that a lot of folks in my community are not like as radical as myself, but there's a lot of folks in my community who are as radical as myself. And my belief, the way I do things, I want to always bring more people in. And I'm kind of like you, like how you spoke this morning about Diallo, how Diallo is like X marks the spot. But I'm more like you in the sense that what point could we come together so that, because my goal is to bring you more left, but I gotta find that point, right? And sometimes I mean, there are spaces I'm definitely not going, but when it comes to doing community work, I'm always gonna try to reach a little bit more to my people because I do understand that we're not necessarily all right, like coming from the same place. So with the denim day thing, what had happened, there were something like 16,000 R kits that had not been processed um since like the 70s. And so on the one hand, it meant that certain people were locked up with and freed because us getting them tested, they were able to go back and get them out. It did mean that other people who had been hiding had to go. And so and that for is our challenge as abolitionists, right? Forever our challenge as abolitionists. Like we don't have the answer to that yet. We're working on a lot of solutions. I would say that Denim Day project was Mahogany's child. And when she came to me on it, I did help her power it and support it because I do stand with survivors. And because I had been doing a lot of the Mute R. Kelly, I had been one of the leaders in the Mute R. Kelly over here and a lot of other spaces where we stand with survivors. um the survivors were the ones that we were actually supporting in that sense. And in those events, like all my other events, we make them events to like do community education, so we weren't just like partnering
No,
up. Yeah,
I just want to be clear. I'm only going off of what I was reading, and just so
yeah.
everybody's clear, the title of the chapter is Hip Hop Activism in Action, and it
Mhm.
is just something I've been struggling with for a long time. And I get it. The label is at times imposed, and at times it is sort of written about, and if left to me, if left unchecked, it's encouraging that this is what activism is. It's the same way I felt when Obama was defined as a community activist. It's we there has to be some distinguishing here, and I think so. I think as a platform and a number, I really appreciate some of the discussions Kamal and Hiram have had, and that panel in Atlanta around where does revolution and non-profiteering, you know, uh, whatever. But what I have felt for a long time is that there has been too much of an acceptance that hip hop activism can be just whatever, and as long as it's got some element or some attachment to hip hop involved, all is good. And I'm just not. So that's it. That's it. And then the particularity of the mixtape in that chapter, which you know just was even more for me a thing like so that's it. Okay.
No, I got you. But
Um,
we do have products. So come over to We Found Hip Hop and you can support us. In addition to the book, we do have an album out, a vinyl. Aisha Ellis, she's a drummer. She has an instrumental
mm,
project that's out now. We're not going with any of the Spotify, iTunes. You can't find it there. You got to come to us to get it. It's a download of vinyl.
and
I'm gonna
that's
send you
intentional.
the vinyl. It's intentional. Yeah. We're like, why? I mean, they're not going to help us anyway. So we don't need to mess with them. I did it. I talked about that this Monday. I was like, my comrades are like, oh, Spotify or iTunes, blah, blah. I'm like, yeah, but if you download it, you can listen to it. And if not, buy the vinyl.
And I
So
just saw the headline. They just redid the streaming thing with Spotify. I thought it said you have to get 1,000 streams before you can get like a penny or something like that, or
it's
some
just
crazy.
stupid. It's just stupid. I mean, what's the point?
Hmm.
Discoverability. Like my thing is like I'm on my approach is the 1,000 fans approach. So if you get a
Mm.
1,000 true fans, you can live a decent life, right? You can put your kids through college, you can, buy a house and just, live a
Mm.
decent life. You get your 1,000 true fans. They're gonna buy your stuff. They're gonna go to your concerts. They're gonna get your merch. They're gonna share it with their people. This is my approach, right? It doesn't mean that I'm like solving capitalism. It's just it's my approach
No, you said, and that's to me
yeah.
is bars. That's beautiful. You said this is for you to sustain you and
Yeah.
to send your kids to school. You're not out here waving the whole this is revolution. You don't need to do nothing else. That's the only thing that gets me activated. Like I'm not like if people would just say this is just so you can live.
Yeah.
I'm not
So you live.
promising you national liberation and eternal afterlives and like all the
Yeah.
other promises. I'm good. And it's okay. Right. So right on.
I gotta get you to come
I
on
like
and
that
talk some
approach.
more about the buying power because on the show I'm talking a lot about like the alternatives to the music business because it's something. So my right before we go, my organization is a combination of it's an organization and this is for what would you call it, like survival tactics. Initially, what I was doing it was just on some guerrilla, just do shit. But now what it is, it's still guerrilla. I'm still the gorilla, but the actual tax framework that I have is I am a L3C. And in the state of Michigan, there are eight states that have this designation called L3C. I think in California and other places they might call it a B Corp. But basically it's a combination of a 501c3 and an LLC. And so you do pay taxes, but you have to be a mission-based business, or you are a nonprofit that has a business arm. But as it stands right now, under your tax bracket, you're a nonprofit because you're not allowed to like earn a profit as a 501c3. And so with the L3C model, we do pay taxes, so we're not a nonprofit, but we can get donations and grants. And for our donors and grantors, we're able to provide the same letter as the 501c3 so that they can get the tax break. And so we're like the best of both worlds. So
why can't we just create the church? Actually have the church
I'm
of
not doing
hip-hop.
that. I'm not doing that, Jared.
And just be like, no taxes, collect the money, everybody chips in, and we could provide. I'm telling you, we could provide some services. We get Diallo to preach. We get
That
Mama's
sounds scary.
Biscuits to be the house band, and then I mean, it's I'm
think though, before we
entirely
go,
joking.
Jared,
Yeah, go ahead, yeah.
we do need a Black Power Media conference, annual
We
conference.
do.
A media conference. Because I know we have like but if we did a Black Power Media conference, that would be awesome. Another thing I think we got to get is these meetups, regional meetups. And then when we get ourselves, if we organize ourselves, you know, the more we are organized, we got so many organizers in the chat, so many amazing people that are doing some just incredible work. And man,
Piper, I think that idea is a.
Is that Skip?
No, that's our brother Mike and Caesar Pena.
No.
That's Killer Mike.
I have hijacked and kidnapped DJ Envy. Don't worry, he'll be back. But I'm with my man Caesar right now. I said, Caesar, you got to show me the gold mines and some.
And he's
like when he caught in the cookie jar. That's his hand caught in the cookie jar, like, ooh.
You got to be careful, Piper. You get caught out here if you don't.
You just don't read, beloved.
A whole nother show like that we have to do on Black Power Media, but I think the Black women should do it, is around like, what do we do about the history? Because we got a lot of figures, and when people are doing history and they're talking about certain people who I won't name them, they say that they should be excluded from the history. But I'm like my beloved sister Rosa Clemente. I don't think they should be excluded. I think we need to name them and name their point in history, just like we would talk about King Leopold. I'm just saying, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, don't exclude them.
Well,
you know?
I think a better way of looking at it from the perspective of those, I agree. And but another way of phrasing it, because we wouldn't want it's not like King Leopold, but it would be from the perspective of the defenders of the United States. It would be like having to incorporate the fact that George Washington was a slave owner.
Right.
Because you want to praise, you want to acknowledge. You can't not acknowledge George Washington in the history of the United States. You just can't, to what some would prefer, leave that part out.
Yeah.
So if it's BAM or anybody else, you can't tell hip hop history without them.
Or talk about the elements.
You can't. Saying. You can't. No, you can't. You're right. And you can't talk about as much whatever I feel about them either. You can't talk about it without Russell or any of them. But you got let's just put the other parts in there.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. I would love to see that. Let me know if you.
I think we gotta get Zenzabel and some more people and yeah, that'd be a great conversation.
And Rosa herself, bring Rosa and get Kim.
Oh yeah, that'd be dope.
Get I would love to hear Coco's thoughts on it. I get the impression, but I always get the impression that she is not every time I feel like I'm gonna ask, "What you think of hip hop?" Like, I don't have time for hip hop.
No,
I'm
she likes hip
studying.
hop.
I know. I'm just like, but I was like, I don't have time to talk about it. I got one hand on somebody's neck and one hand on a book. I don't have time to be.
Share her baby. Yeah. So.
And then, well, of course, right, of course.
Yeah.
Anyway, so, but yeah, but get Coco, get whoever else. Yeah, Tandy Seasway.
Oh yeah, Tandy. She's. Oh, and get her book. Get her new book.
Yeah, some of us are brave.
Are you? I think she's gonna do an interview with Kalanji. Right?
Oh, really? I don't know.
I think so.
Word,
I think so.
right on. Okay,
yeah,
good.
yeah. Get that book. Get that book. But I just appreciate you for having me on here. I'm so honored. Now I ticked
Piper,
off
stop it.
the life
Stop
goal.
Playing. No, we got to do. We got to do this again because there's more about your work and about hip hop in general that I'd like to talk about. But you all arrange this panel first, and then.
Okay, yeah, let's do it. I'm gonna talk to Tandy. We'll get it popping.
Yeah, I don't get the impression Joy is listening to much rap.
Joy, would she be interested? We can ask.
We can ask. She's always welcome. More excuses to get her on here. So, all right, everybody. Peace if you're willing to fight for it, like Fred Hampton used to say. Thank you, Piper, very much. Make sure you got all the bells rung so you don't miss when Piper comes up and anybody else comes up. When are you coming on next? Do you ever?
Mondays at 8. Yep, Mondays at 8.
Boom.
Right here on Black Power Media.
There it is. And we'll see you next time. Peace, everybody. Thanks again.
Peace.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.